Well, hello again. Gary Stearman, time for another edition of Prophecy in the News. Today we've got a tremendous program for you. Avi Lipkin is here from Israel, and he's brought his brand new book. It's called Return to Mecca. This is going to be a great program. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome Avi Lipkin back to Oklahoma City, back to Prophecy in the News. Avi, it's always fun when you're here.
Love to be here.
And today, it's not only going to be fun, but we're going to get serious because you've brought your new book. It's called Return to Mecca. And the topic of this book is absolutely revolutionary and has a lot to do with Bible prophecy, both from the perspective of the Jews and the Christians. And that's why we've invited him here. Avi is a Jew speaking on behalf of Judaism, and he's presenting a message that I think you need to hear. He wants his own people to hear this message. Isn't that right, Avi?
Very correct. And by the way, my people, forgive me for being arrogant, are the Jews and the Christians together.
Thank you for saying that.
Yes.
And by the way, I've known Avi for enough years to know that he has tremendous affection among Christians all over the United States. In my little church assembly included among those, because we always remember the time you came. And Avi always has something new and interesting to talk about. And today, and the title of this book, Return to Mecca, what could that possibly mean? And on the cover is a picture of a black cube. That's where the story starts. Avi, let's start right there.
Yes. I believe that the Bible is a GPS. I believe that the Bible took place, a lot of it took place in Arabia. There are certain Christians like the Caldwells, Jim and Penny, who spent 14 years in Arabia, and many Christians, not only they, Leonard Moeller, Dr. Kim from Korea, Ron Wyatt, and Bob Tornyuk, there are a lot of people. Actually, in most churches, Christians say to me, we know that Mount Sinai, the real Mount Sinai, is not in the Sinai Peninsula, but rather in northwest Saudi Arabia. It's called Jebel al-Lawz. So a lot of my inspiration for what I'm doing, I received from the Christians. I am the first Jew in the Jewish world who's coming to the rabbis and saying, the Torah is a GPS. Jethro, the high priest of Midian, I believe was the high priest of the Kaaba, the black stone, which is today in Mecca. There was no Mecca. It was just a black stone in those days. Moses was the son-in-law of Jethro. Moses was the understudy of Jethro for 40 years. And when Moses went to take the children of Israel out of slavery, he gave them the phylacteries, which they are to put on their forehead and on their left arm, as a sign from God that we are leaving the pyramid system of slavery in Egypt and we're going to the cube system of freedom in Arabia. And it must be remembered that there was no Judaism in those days. There was no Christianity. There was no Islam. All people, including the Israelite slaves, were pagans. And of course, the golden calf, basically the children of Israel reverted to the gods that they had known in Egypt. Yes. When Moses delayed coming back. So the purpose of this book is to show where exactly we were, and that 38 years at least of the Exodus was in Arabia. Moses, Aaron, Jethro were at the Kaaba, which is today Mecca. And when God says in Deuteronomy 11 that the borders of Israel will include the desert to the south, that desert is Arabia. And the soles of our feet, wherever the soles of our feet will tread, will belong to Israel.
Now, let's stop right there. And what I'd like to do at this point is sort of recapitulate the Exodus.
Correct.
For those watching, there are a lot of errors in the thinking of Christians over the years because we've had the wrong location for Mount Horeb. Right. And that came as a kind of a historical accident, if you will, back at the beginning of the Christian era. And so let's recapitulate the wilderness wanderings of the children of Israel. They left Egypt and they headed east and they crossed what the Bible calls the Red Sea.
Right.
You take it from there.
Yes. Well, indeed, It could not have been further to the north because the Egyptian army under Pharaoh controlled the entire Egyptian peninsula. And it says in the Bible that they didn't go north, they went south because the north were the Philistines. And the Israelites feared warfare with them. So they took an entirely different path, which Moses probably knew because Moses was a general in the Egyptian army. Moses waged the war in Ethiopia. It's something that most Jews and Christians don't even know. You have to go to Josephus and other sources to know about General Moses, the Egyptian general in Egypt. But he knew Sinai. He knew the other side of the lake, the other side of the pond. Jethro was a cousin because Jethro's descended from Midian. Midian was one of the brothers of Isaac. So you have Ishmael, son of Hagar, and then you have the children of Keturah. So Midian is one of the children of Keturah. And from Midian you go down to the next generation, which is Reuel or Raguel. And one of the names of Jethro in the Bible is Reuel. So he was probably, in the Middle East, many times people are named after grandfathers and great-grandfathers. So Moses, when he had to flee Egypt after he killed the taskmaster who was beating the Jewish slave, the Israelite slave, he knew where he was going. He knew the geography. He was almost Pharaoh, so he had to know the geography. So he took the Israelites through the desert to what is today Nuweiba, on the eastern shore of the Red Sea of Sinai. That is where they crossed. By the way, King Solomon set up pillars, columns, on the two opposite sides of the coast where the Israelites crossed. The Saudis destroyed one of them and threw it into the sea. And that area is forbidden for foreigners to go swimming. Anyone who goes swimming there will be shot. So the Saudi army is there, making sure nobody gets near that pillar. So we know where the pillar is.
Uh-huh.
And I think from what the Caldwells told me that on the Egyptian side, the pillar is still there also. And of course, there are the proofs of the chariots that are in the Red Sea there at that place, and human bones and other signs that prove.
Now, that sea is not called the Red Sea today.
Okay, now Yam Suf could mean the Reed Sea. The two E's became one E, which is the Red Sea, because of course it's not red, even though the mountains are Edom, which are red mountains. But another meaning of Suf or Sof means the boundary sea, meaning that if we are looking at Arabia, if we are looking at the entirety of Arabia, that the Israelites went to places like Basra, which is mentioned in the Bible. They went to Yemen, which is mentioned in the Bible. They went to places near Oman, which is mentioned in the Bible. And there are archaeological proofs. 40 years in the desert. Sinai Peninsula of Egypt could not house 1, 2, or 3 million people for 40 years. There was nowhere to go. There was no food. And by the way, there's no archaeological proof at all of an exodus in the Sinai Peninsula. But there is tons of archaeological proof in the Arabian Peninsula.
Now, my point will bring us to I think, the meat of the subject today. Mount Horeb, then, is across on the east side of the Red Sea. It's in the land that the Bible calls Midian.
Right.
And right on the edge of the Saudi Arabian desert, if you look at a map. And so that's where the children of Israel lodged, at the foot of Mount Horeb.
Very correct. And by the way, in Deuteronomy 2, verse 2, God says to the Israelites, or to Moses, to the Israelites, enough being encamped around this mountain, turn northward, meaning we were southward. Turn northward to the land of the Amorites, which I have promised you. Now, again, one of the problems here is when we're looking at the final borders of Israel, as promised by God, the borders say from the Mediterranean to the Euphrates and from Lebanon to the desert. So what's the desert? The desert is not the Negev. The Negev was the tribe of Judah. The desert is not Sinai Peninsula. That was Pharaonic Egypt. The desert had to have been Saudi Arabia.
Desert had to have been Saudi Arabia. Now, here it gets interesting. The 40-year wilderness wandering of the children of Israel took place in Saudi Arabia,
Correct.
You believe.
Right.
And this is quite fascinating because it opens the subject that we'll be dealing with in this book, Return to Mecca.
Yes, and indeed, even when we read the Bible, when we read, for example, the book of Exodus, and God is describing the instructions of how to make the Ark of the Covenant and the tent of the meeting, and the boards, the wooden boards that were used, they say north is north, east is east, Kedma.
Right.
South is Yemen, facing towards Yemen, and westward facing towards the Red Sea, Yama. So what it means is, if the sea is to your Red Sea is to your back and Yemen is to your right, then you're in Saudi Arabia.
Now, on the back of this book, there are 10 questions, some of them rather complex. But the first question on the back of this book, what role do Mecca and Medina play in the struggle between Western civilization and Islam? That is a $15 question if there ever was one. And I'm trying now to move us into an area that I think most of our audience probably wouldn't be accustomed to thinking about. But this is very interesting.
Well, I believe that we are facing an Elijah moment. If you remember in the Bible, Elijah faced off against 450 priests of Baal. And, they set up their altars. And, by the way, it's interesting. The 450 priests of Baal, they were dancing and singing and jumping.
Yeah.
And their god or their gods did not consume their offering. So Elijah mockingly says, where's your God? Why doesn't he consume the offering? Maybe he's on a trip. Maybe he's in the bathroom, Maybe he's sleeping, And what did they start doing? They started taking knives and they started cutting their faces and to bleed. And this is, I think, the pagan origins of the Ashura, of the Shiites. The Shiites, they stab themselves, they slit their heads until they draw blood. And so we see this in 1 Kings chapter 18. Chapter 19, when he flees, Elijah goes down to Beersheba, and the angel of the Lord says, you have 40 days and 40 nights walking till you reach Mount Horeb. That had to have been in Saudi. But the point I'm saying is, getting back to Mecca and Medina, this is an Elijah moment. We are now playing a game that all American kids know. It's called Capture the Flag.
Oh, yes.
The Muslims want Jerusalem, not because Jerusalem is holy for them, which it is not. Jerusalem is not holy for the Muslims. It is not in the Quran. The importance of Jerusalem is to deny it to the Jews and the Christians. And so if they get Jerusalem, their system wins. Now, my contention through my book is, if we Judeo-Christians get Mecca and Medina, then we capture the flag, and it is the termination of Allah, who I say is Satan, and sending the devil to the pits of hell for 1,000 years. So this is a victory for the human race if we get Mecca and Medina. And we will get Mecca and Medina because I believe the Arab Spring, which has totally overturned all these regimes in the Middle East, will reach Jordan, will reach Saudi Arabia, and the day will come that even certain Saudis will beg Israel to come in and save them from the other Saudis who want to kill them. And we're going to get Mecca and Medina.
It seems to me, Avi, that you're sort of replaying an ancient story that took place in the days of Moses at Mount Horeb, and there we find the rock that Moses struck, and we find the cave up on the side of the mountain where perhaps where Elijah stayed when he went down to Mount Horeb. We find an altar at the foot of that mountain. And there was all kinds of archaeological traces that the Jews were there and they were sacrificing on an altar at the instructions of Moses. And we find, in other words, an incredible drama played out there in that vicinity, and then in the desert itself. And we think of Mecca and Medina as being rather close by. And what you're saying, in a way, is that this whole drama, thousands of years later, is going to be replayed.
We are the generation that will see these things come to pass. And it's very exciting. I think I'm just very shocked at how I haven't seen any Jews until now come out and say what I'm saying. And where did I learn this from? From the Christians. And so this is a revolution. I'm hoping that the rabbis in Israel will adopt this theory that I'm proving here in my book. Christians know it's to be true. By the way, in the New Testament, chapter 4, verse 25 of Galatians, it says, that Mount Sinai and Hagar, which are in Arabia. Josephus speaks very clearly that Sinai, the Ishmaelites are there, the troglodytes are there, the children of Keturah are there, the children of Esau are there. Everybody is there, and they're all one family. And what do they have in common? They hate the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which, by the way, are the forefathers of the Christians too.
Now, you're all familiar with Avi's 5 previous books, and we've offered these together as the Avi Lipkin package: Christians' Revival for Israel's Survival, Israel's Bible Block, We have another one, is Fanatical Islam, A Global Threat. I've shown you these books many, many times, and lots of you have ordered the Avi Lipkin package, Islamic Threat Update Almanac. And then Avi says this one is the one that he really enjoyed putting together, Islam Prophesied in Genesis. But you told me just a minute ago that this is the one.
Yes.
This is the book that you really have been waiting to write all these years.
Right.
And folks, let me tell you, this introduces revolutionary subject matter that you have not thought of, and it'll open your eyes as to Bible prophecy. It's called Return to Mecca. Yours for $19.95 plus shipping and handling when you call the 800 number on your screen. And I do hope you will. Avi's latest book is going to make you think. And I think in ways that you don't think you'll be thinking. It's that kind of book. It's revolutionary, I do believe.
I wanted to add another thing also. My fifth book, the black book, the one about Islam prophesied in Genesis, this is about Islam prophesied in Exodus and the other books of the Bible. And my intention had not been to write the fifth book, but to write this book directly. But before I could write about Exodus and the other books of the Bible, I said, you know what, I got to stop a moment, and I've got to go back and define who is God and who is Satan. And Satan is Allah. And I have a 3-year jail sentence in Switzerland for saying it, but Satan is Allah. All the attributes of the Islamic system are the opposite of the Judeo-Christian system. Our God is a God of creation. Allah is a God of destruction. Our God is a God who loves the Jews, loves the Christians. Together we're the apple of his eye. He loves the Hindus, he loves the Buddhists, he loves the blacks, and he loves the Muslims, because all human beings are created in his image. Allah hates the Jews, wants them dead on Saturday, hates the Christians, wants them dead on Sunday, hates the Hindus, the Buddhists, and the blacks, wants them dead any day. And then, of course, the Muslims slaughter each other in the name of Allah. So how can Allah be God? Allah is the opposite of God. So what's the opposite of God? Satan. Another thing, our God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is the God of truth. Allah is known as Al-Makr. Al-Makr in Arabic means Allah is the greatest of all the liars and deceivers. And one of the virtues in Islam is to be a liar. It's called taqiyya, means you're commanded to lie to the infidel.
To lie in the cause of Allah.
Of Allah.
Yeah.
The problem is then they lie to each other. Because once you lie to the enemy, you lie to each other, because it's an attribute. Judeo-Christianity looks at truth as the virtue.
Now, we have about 10 minutes left, and on the cover of Avi's book is this place of pilgrimage for the Islamic world. I guess every Islamic male is commanded at least once in his life to make a pilgrimage to march around this cubical altar called the Kaaba.
By the way, a lot of women also go on the Hajj.
Okay. And now, on the inside cover, and we'll be showing you this, of Avi's book, he's wearing phylacteries, which are cube-shaped scripture containers that are bound to the forehead and to the arm. Inside the back page of Avi's book, you have here a medieval portrait of a couple of figures also wearing phylacteries. Let's talk about the history of Jewish phylacteries. I'm sure that most of our Christian audience out there doesn't know exactly what they're for, maybe doesn't even have much of an idea that they even exist. So let's start at ground zero and talk about the linkage between the Jews who wear phylacteries and this pilgrimage to Mecca.
By the way, if Christians have ever come to Israel, so I'm talking now to the people who've been to Israel, they've seen it on the flight.
Yes.
Because when people are still snoozing and the sun comes up as the plane is approaching Israel, you see the Orthodox Jewish men go to the back of the plane and they pray, and they put on the phylacteries. And this is a tradition that goes back 3,500 years. By the way, very important, and I learned this in the Jewish Theological Seminary, we studied the New Testament. Matthew 23, verse 5. Jesus is criticizing the Pharisees, and he says, for all their works they do to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries, and they enlarge the hems of their garments, or the tzitzit on their prayer shawls. And it's interesting indeed that today there are 3 types of phylactery. You have the size A, the size B, and the size C. And so what Jesus was saying was, he wasn't saying don't put on the phylacteries, which I'm sure Jesus did. What he was saying was, that if you have the $200 phylactery and you have the $400 phylactery, and you have the $600 phylactery, which is humongous, don't spend your money on $600 phylactery, spend it on the $200 and give the $400 to charity to feed the poor. So, but it's something, it's in Matthew 23 verse 5. So we know that Jewish men in those days wore this. We know that in the Greek Orthodox Christian tradition, there are priests who put on phylacteries. It's a slightly different Greek phylactery, but it all commemorates exactly the same thing. So the phylacteries have a very important meaning for Christians as well.
So my question, and I'll ask it for everybody who's watching, why in the world would you put on, strap a little wooden box with scriptures from Deuteronomy on the inside and attach that to your left arm and to your forehead? Why would you do that, and why would it be cube-shaped?
Perfectly cube-shaped. And so the contention in my book is that when Moses came to Pharaoh, and remember, Pharaoh was God. Pharaoh was God in Egypt to the Egyptian people. He created the Nile, and he created this, and he created that. And who's Moses? Moses is a guy who stutters. It's very hard to talk. And God says, give the people a sign. And the phylacteries were the sign. He gave Pharaoh the signs. You remember his rod became a crocodile or serpent, and ate the other crocodiles. Right. And the leprosy in the chest. These are all signs. And then later the 10 plagues. And Moses gave signs to the elders of Israel. And Moses gave signs to the people. You're talking about primitive pagan people who were shepherds. And they're saying to Moses, well, why should we listen to you? You know, and so this phylactery has 4 pouches, 4 parchments. The first 2 are Exodus 13. Then you have Deuteronomy 6 and Deuteronomy 11. Exodus 13, we are still in Egypt. We are still in slavery. We're about to flee. But Exodus 13 talks about a sign on thy arm and frontlets between thine eyes. And, I know young people won't know the word that I'm going to say now, but there's a word that older people like you and I remember, which is, gyroscope. A gyroscope takes us directly in the direction we have to go. And Moses is leading the children of Israel out of the pyramid triangular system to the cubic square system of freedom in the desert. And again, Moses says to Pharaoh, let my people go so that they may circle me in the desert. The other 5 times, let my people go so that they may serve the Lord in the desert. But the first one is they should go around in circles. Now, Hajj is a pilgrim to Mecca. Hag is the Egyptian pronunciation. Hag in Hebrew means a holiday or going around in circles. And so the first meaning really meant, let my people go so that they may sacrifice to the Lord at the Kaaba in Mecca, which there was no Mecca at the time, which is the black stone. Jethro was the high priest. Moses was the understudy of the high priest. And so he knew why, spiritually, he was taking the children of Israel out of slavery from the pyramid system to the square system to Jethro. Then, of course, as you know, God finally says, no, you're not going to turn right, you're going to turn left. Instead of going to Mecca and Medina, we turn to the Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb, which, as you said very correctly, is within sight of Eilat and Aqaba and the Red Sea.
And so the key word is Midian. That's where Mount Horeb is. Midian, of course, is right on the edge of the Saudi Arabian desert.
Right.
Look it up in a map. It's amazing. For years, that whole geographical relationship has sort of lain dormant. It's been hidden. And now suddenly it's awakening. A lot of the maps in your Bibles, you look back there and it'll have Mount Sinai over in the Sinai Peninsula. Wrong map, folks.
Right.
The map is being redrawn in our day, and this is what Avi is really talking about.
And by the way, one of the most ironic things is, that unfortunately there are many, many rabbis who have a disdain for Christians and Christianity. But if Helena, the mother of Constantine, said, well, guess what? It's in the Sinai Peninsula, and the Jews say, yeah, fine, that's fine with us. It's not. It's not in Sinai. Sinai was pharaonic Egypt. Pharaoh had his armies there. They had mines. There was an Egyptian presence. The Israelites were in Arabia. And Mount Sinai, as it says in Galatians 4:25, Mount Sinai, which is in Arabia.
The book is called Return to Mecca, yours for $19.95 plus shipping and handling. In just a moment, I'm going to ask Avi about the title. And I want to go back and revisit this. Why the title, Return to Mecca? You're going to find some really stimulating material in here. And as I say, it's going to fill in a blank that you don't have. You students of Bible prophecy, I think, will be very excited to read these things. We're also offering, of course, as we have for quite a while, and I don't know how many years it's been, Avi, that we've offered these books. We lump them together. They are called the Avi Lipkin package. We have sold hundreds of these, and we're continuing to offer them because they're still popular. The Avi Lipkin package, $49.95 plus shipping and handling. This book, his latest, Return to Mecca, $19.95 plus shipping and handling. If you call the 800 number on your screen, 1-800-475-1111. We have about 2 minutes. Return to Mecca. What does that mean? It's in plain language that we can grab hold of and take with us.
Well, I believe that the Arab Spring, which a year ago just started, it has spread from Tunisia to Libya to Egypt to Yemen. It's now in the middle of its process in Syria. I believe there are signs already in Jordan. I believe that the Arab Spring will come to Saudi Arabia. When it comes to Saudi Arabia, there will be such a civil war in Saudi Arabia, and it'll be Shiites versus Sunnis. It'll be Sunnis versus Sunnis. It's going to be Osama bin Laden Saudis versus the more secular Saudi, not secular, the ones who believe in cooperating with the West. And what's going to happen is I believe those that are cooperating with the West are going to send out an SOS to the United States, come and save us. And the United States is going to say to Israel, you're going to help us on this one. So why don't we occupy certain parts of Saudi Arabia, and why doesn't Israel occupy certain parts of Saudi Arabia to save these Saudis who are going to be wiped out by the other Saudis or the Iranians, whoever? And so what I see happening here is a political trend. And what I'm doing in my book is to give the biblical reasons why it makes sense. Return to Mecca means the return of the Israelites to Mecca, Medina, and Mount Sinai. And, again, I know there are many Jews and Christians who don't like what I say, but I lump the Jews and the Christians together as one people. And when we take Mecca and Medina, I believe the borders of Israel will go down from Lebanon all the way to Mecca and Medina. There will be more Christians also moving to Israel who are married to us, who are part of our families. I believe that the borders will go, according to Deuteronomy 11, from the Nile to the Euphrates and from Lebanon to Saudi. And so return to Mecca means this is the biblical roots for why this is about to happen.
Avi Lipkin, always interesting, always controversial, and by the way, always on the cutting edge. He's a great thinker. He believes that this book was inspired. He told me that he really believed he was guided to write this book. I think you'll enjoy it. Avi, you must come and see us again.
Always do.
Avi Lipkin from Israel. Gary Stearman, wishing you a great day in the Lord. I hope you will read this book. And remember, keep looking up. Prophecy in the News is a viewer-supported ministry sponsored by our many friends across America and in your area. For your gift of $10, you can receive a special edition of our current program on an audio CD, or for a gift of $20, we'll send you our programs on DVD videos. For either order, call the 800 number on your screen right now. Turn to Mecca. What could that possibly mean? And on the cover is a picture of a black cube. That's where the story starts. Avi, let's start right there.
Yes. I believe that the Bible is a GPS. I believe that the Bible took place, a lot of it took place in Arabia. There are certain Christians like the Caldwells, Jim and Penny, who spent 14 years in Arabia, and many Christians.
Well, hello again. Gary Stearman, time for another edition of Prophecy in the News. Today we've got a tremendous program for you. Avi Lipkin is here from Israel, and he's brought his brand new book. It's called Return to Mecca. This is going to be a great program. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome Avi Lipkin back to Oklahoma City, back to Prophecy in the News. Avi, it's always fun when you're here.
Love to be here. Not only they, Leonard Moeller, Dr. Kim from Korea, Ron Wyatt, and Bob Tornyuk, there are a lot of people. Actually, in most churches, Christians say to me, we know that Mount Sinai, the real Mount Sinai, is not in the Sinai Peninsula, but rather in northwest Saudi Arabia. It's called Jebel al-Lawz. So a lot of my inspiration for what I'm doing, I received from the Christians. I am the first Jew in the Jewish world who's coming to the rabbis and saying, the Torah is a GPS.
And today, it's not only going to be fun, but we're going to get serious because you've brought your new book. It's called Return to Mecca. And the topic of this book is absolutely revolutionary and has a lot to do with Bible prophecy, both from the perspective of the Jews and the Christians. And that's why we've invited him here. Avi is a Jew speaking on behalf of Judaism, and he's presenting a message that I think you need to hear. He wants his own people to hear this message. Isn't that right, Avi?
Very correct. By the way, my people, forgive me for being arrogant, are the Jews and the Christians together.
Thank you for saying that.
Yes.
And by the way, I've known Avi for enough years to know that he has tremendous affection among Christians all over the United States. In my little church assembly included among those, because we always remember the time you came. And Avi always has something new and interesting to talk about. And today, and the title of this book,